With Elizabeth I's refusal to marry, and England being divided between Catholics and Protestants, there loomed a succession crisis over the right to the English throne. One candidate was already a queen, and has become a household name. This is the history of Mary, Queen of Scots. Mary was born on the 8th of December 1542 at Linlithgow Palace, Scotland, to King James V and his French second wife, Mary of Guise. She was the great-granddaughter of King Henry VII of England through her paternal grandmother, Margaret Tudor. Margaret was Henry VIII's older sister, so Mary was Henry VIII's great-niece. On the 14th of December, Mary's father died, perhaps from the effects of a nervous collapse following the Battle of Selway Moss. Mary, being the only legitimate child of James, became Queen of Scotland. She was just 6 days old. As Mary was too young to rule, Scotland was ruled by regents until she became an adult. King Henry VIII of England took the opportunity of the regency to propose a marriage between Mary and his own son and heir, Edward, hoping for a union of Scotland and England. On the 1st of July 1543, when Mary was 6 months old, the Treaty of Greenwich was signed, which promised that, at the age of 10, Mary would marry Edward and move to England, where Henry would oversee her upbringing. Relations with England broke down, and the Treaty of Greenwich was ultimately rejected by the Scottish Parliament on the 11th of December 1543, leading to 8 years of conflict known as the Rough Wooing. In 1548, Mary was betrothed to Francis, the Dauphin of France, and was sent to be brought up in the French court, where she would be safe from invading English forces. She would spend the next 13 years at the French court, where she was described as vivacious, beautiful and clever. Mary was eloquent and especially tall by 16th century standards, being 5 feet 11 inches in height. On the 4th of April 1558, Mary signed a secret agreement leaving Scotland and her claim to the English throne to the French crown if she died without issue. 20 days later, she married the Dauphin at Notre Dame in Paris. When Henry II of France died on the 10th of July 1559, from injuries sustained in a joust, 15-year-old Francis and 16-year-old Mary became King and Queen of France. Her joint reign was short-lived, as Francis II died on the 5th of December 1560. Mary returned to Scotland 9 months later and had little direct experience of the dangerous and complex political situation in Scotland. As a devout Catholic, she was regarded with suspicion by many of her subjects, as well as by the Queen of England. The tense religious and political climate that Mary encountered on her return to Scotland was further roused by prominent Scots, such as John Knox, who openly questioned whether her subjects had a duty to obey her. The early years of her personal rule were marked by pragmatism, tolerance and moderation. Mary sent William Maitland of Leamington as an ambassador to the English court to put the case for Mary as the heir presumptive to the English throne. Elizabeth refused to name a potential heir, fearing that it would invite conspiracy to displace her with the nominated successor. However, she assured Maitland that she knew no one with a better claim than Mary. Mary then turned her attention to finding a new husband from the royalty of Europe. When her uncle, the Cardinal of Lorraine, began negotiations with Archduke Charles of Austria without her consent, she angrily objected, and the negotiations foundered. Her own attempt to negotiate a marriage with Don Carlos, the mentally unstable heir apparent of King Philip II of Spain, was rebuffed by Philip. Elizabeth attempted to neutralise Mary by suggesting that she marry English Protestant Robert Dudley, 1st Earl of Leicester. Elizabeth sent an ambassador to tell Mary that if she married an English nobleman, Elizabeth would proceed to the inquisition of her right and title to be our next cousin and heir. The proposal came to nothing, not least because the intended bridegroom was unwilling. Mary finally decided on marrying her half-cousin, Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, in 1565, and in June 1566 they had a son, James. In February 1567, Darnley's residence was destroyed by an explosion, and he was found murdered in the garden. James Hepburn, 4th Earl of Bothwell, was generally believed to have organised Darnley's death, but he was acquitted of the charge in April 1567, and the following month he married Mary. Following an uprising against the couple, Mary was imprisoned in Lochleven Castle. On the 24th of July 1567, she was forced to abdicate in favour of her 1-year-old son, James. After an unsuccessful attempt to regain the throne, she fled southward, seeking the protection of her first cousin once removed, Elizabeth I of England. Mary expected Elizabeth to help her regain her throne, though Elizabeth was cautious, ordering an inquiry into the conduct of the Confederate lords and the question of whether Mary was guilty of Darnley's murder. In mid-July 1568, English authorities moved Mary to Bolton Castle because it was further from the Scottish border, but not too close to London. As an anointed queen, Mary refused to acknowledge the power of any court to try her. She refused to attend the inquiry at York personally, but sent representatives. As evidence against Mary, Regent Moray presented the so-called casket letters, 8 unsigned letters purportedly from Mary to Bothwell, 2 marriage contracts, and a love sonnet or sonnets. All were said to have been found in a silver gilt casket. Mary denied writing them and insisted they were forgeries, arguing that her handwriting was not difficult to imitate. They are widely believed to be crucial as to whether Mary shared the guilt for Darnley's murder. The chair of the Commission of Inquiry, the Duke of Norfolk, described them as horrible letters and diverse fond ballads. He sent copies to Elizabeth, saying that if they were genuine, they might prove Mary's guilt. The majority of the commissioners accepted the casket letters as genuine after a study of their contents and comparison of the penmanship with examples of Mary's handwriting. Elizabeth, as she wished, concluded the inquiry with a verdict that nothing was proven against either the Confederate lords or Mary. For overriding political reasons, Elizabeth wished neither to convict nor acquit Mary of murder. On the 26th of January 1569, Mary was moved to Tutbury Castle and placed in the custody of the Earl of Shrewsbury and his formidable wife, Bess of Hardwicke. Elizabeth considered Mary's designs on the English throne to be a serious threat, and so confined her to Shrewsbury's properties, including Tutbury, Sheffield Castle, Sheffield Manor Lodge, Wigfield Manor and Chatsworth House, all located in the interior of England, halfway between Scotland and London, and distant from the sea. Though effectively a prisoner, Mary lived in comfort and was permitted her own domestic staff, which was never numbered fewer than 16. She needed 30 carts to transport her belongings from house to house, and her chambers were decorated with fine tapestries and carpets, as well as her cloth of state. Elizabeth's principal secretary, William Cecil, and Sir Francis Walsingham watched Mary carefully with the aid of spies placed in her household. In 1571, Cecil and Walsingham, at the time England's ambassador to France, uncovered the Ridolfi plot, a plan to replace Elizabeth with Mary with the help of Spanish troops and the Duke of Norfolk. Norfolk was executed, and the English Parliament introduced a bill barring Mary from the throne, to which Elizabeth refused to give royal assent. Plots centred on Mary continued, and in February 1585, William Perry, a Welsh courtier and spy, was convicted of plotting to assassinate Elizabeth, without Mary's knowledge, although her agent Thomas Morgan was implicated. In April, Mary was placed in the strict custody of Sir Amias Paulet. At Christmas, she was moved to a moated manor house at Chartley. On the 11th of August 1586, after being implicated in the Babington plot, Mary was arrested while out riding and taken to Tixall Hall in Staffordshire. In a successful attempt to entrap her, Walsingham had deliberately arranged for Mary's letters to be smuggled out of Chartley. Mary was misled into thinking her letters were secure, while in reality they were deciphered and read by Walsingham. From these letters, it was clear that Mary had sanctioned the attempted assassination of Elizabeth. Mary was moved to Fotheringhay Castle in October, and she was put on trial for treason under the Act for the Queen's Safety before a court of 36 noblemen, including Cecil, Shrewsbury and Walsingham. Despite denying the charges, Mary was convicted on the 25th of October and sentenced to death. On the 1st of February 1587, Elizabeth signed the death warrant, and on the 3rd of February, 10 members of the Privy Council of England, having been summoned by Cecil without Elizabeth's knowledge, decided to carry out the sentence at once. At Fotheringhay, on the evening of the 7th of February 1587, Mary was told that she was to be executed the next morning. She spent the last hours of her life in prayer, distributing her belongings to her household, and writing her will and a letter to the King of France. The scaffold that was erected in the Great Hall was draped in black cloth. It was reached by 3 steps, and furnished with a block, a cushion for her to kneel on, and 3 stools for her and the Earls of Shrewsbury and Kent, who were there to witness the execution. Mary ascended the 3 stairs to the scaffold, where the executioner knelt and asked for her forgiveness, which she freely gave. Her servants, Jane Kennedy and Elizabeth Curl, helped Mary remove her outer garments, revealing a velvet petticoat and a pair of sleeves in crimson brown, the liturgical colour of martyrdom in the Catholic Church. She was blindfolded by Kennedy with a white veil embroidered in gold, then knelt down on the cushion in front of the block on which she positioned her head and stretched out her arms. Her last words were, "Into thy hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit." Mary was not beheaded with a single strike. The first blow missed her neck and struck the back of her head. The second blow severed her neck, except for a small bit of sinew which the executioner cut through using his axe. Afterwards, he held her head aloft and declared, "God save the Queen." At that moment, the red tresses in his hand turned out to be a wig, and the head fell to the ground, revealing that Mary had very short, grey hair. Mary's request to be buried in France was refused by Elizabeth. Her body was instead embalmed and left in a secure coffin until her burial in a Protestant service at Peterborough Cathedral in late July 1587. Her entrails, removed as part of the embalming process, were buried secretly within Fotheringhay Castle. Her body was exhumed in 1612 when her son, James VI and I, ordered that she be reinterred at Westminster Abbey, in a chapel opposite the tomb of Elizabeth.